Welcome back to part 4. Let's get started finishing those back legs. I'm going to use my NuPastel 259 dark gray to add a light layer of dark gray over the brown and blue that we previously applied. This is the same procedure we've been using for the entire horse, and as I've told you guys before, this is a great way to paint a black or brown horse. Just adjust the amount of brown or black color that you use when you're doing that to coincide with the type of horse that you're painting. So I'm evening up my edges as I go along. I'm using the sharp edge or the back edge, one of the flat edges of my 211 NuPastel to outline this back leg. And I'm going to add a little bit of this Titian Brown 333 over that. Sometimes I look at something and decide the better choice would be another color, and so that's what I did. This is the 405 Blue Haze. Using that to add some color accents on the outside of that back leg. I'm adding a little tiny bit of light blue 235 over the blue haze to brighten it up just a little bit. And this is the 305 Spruce Blue. So I'm darkening up this area. It's not quite dark enough with the Spruce Blue. I'm going right over the marks that I made before. And you can see they show through. I'm using the edge of my 211 white NuPastel on the bottom of that foot. And here I'm adding black to darken that back leg. I'm firming up the outline of his back leg with the pointed tip of a 229 NuPastel. Now I'm going to go ahead and finish this back leg. I'm using black and spruce blue to finish up this back leg. Right now I have spruce blue in my hand. And this is the dark gray 259. And then the 229 black. I'm putting in my highlights with my 249 NuPastel. Short strokes on the edge and a little bit of 211 white to make it brighter in a few places. And then I'll use my 213 Sanguine to add some red or red-brown color accents to that back hoof. And I put a little Titian brown over that too. Now this is 253 Cocoa Brown that I'm using on the hoof to give it a brown tone. I don't want to use the Titian brown. And then I'm adding 276 Buff to add some accent over that where the light hits it. Creates roundness on that foot. I decided to use a little blue haze in here to add a little additional accents. I think you have to always be evaluating your painting, looking back and forth, and deciding what the painting needs. And this is the 100.5 Rembrandt white, so it's brighter. So I'm using it to add just tiny, bright white accent. Here I'm putting in the tail using my black 229 NuPastel. It's the only part of the horse that's not finished yet. Putting in a little highlight. Now let's add some beach. I'm using the 727.8 light blue-gray Rembrandt, and I'm using the short end of the stick, so to speak, to get into the small places. And I'm putting a base coat of this blue-gray down on the area behind the horse, and carefully going around the legs. I can go right over the foam, it won't affect it. So I'm going down to the edge of where the water line is going to be to the beach. I think you'll be amazed at how easily we can form the illusion of water and beach with just a few colors and a few simple techniques. Now to add the color of the water on the beach, we're using the same colors we used before. Right at this moment I'm using 522.8 turquoise blue to add blue color. Then if I think it needs blending, I'll use some more of the gray, which is what I have in my hand. So I use the gray over that to kind of blend it in to the background. And then I'm going to add the 205.3 lemon yellow, which is really kind of a citrus green, to add a green tone to the water. A little more gray. I always check the end of my pastel stick. You'll see me looking at it to make sure I don't have a color on there that I don't want. Now this is 570.9 phthalo blue, which is the lightest color we have. And you can see I put that over where the 205.3 is, and it turns it kind of a yellowish blue, little green blue. It's a good color. The color I have in my hand now is 508.8 Prussian blue, adding a little deeper blue back there and a little more yellow on top of that. Just kind of play with the colors till you get what you want. I want it darker right there because that's the base of a wave. So I'm putting light underneath with buff 276. It creates a nice light. And then I'm going to darken the base of that wave with 253 cocoa brown, just a little brown. I want something to make it darker but not be too distinct. Using the edge of my 211 white NuPastel, I can add streaks of foam to indicate the water in the background. I'm using same colors. I'm adding a lot of brown in here to indicate the beach. I'm giving it kind of a streaky appearance. Now here I'm using the corner of my NuPastel to add little dots of foam. You can use a pointed one, but I just happen to have this one in my hand, so I'm just using the corner. I'm using the white NuPastel to make little dots of foam over the hoof. Being very careful to be nice and neat with my placement. Here I'm using a darker brown. This is 223 Burnt Umber. I want things to be a little darker and sharper as we move into the foreground, and you can see the tip is very sharp, and I'm just using a very thin line to delineate the areas that I want to. Now I've switched back and forth between the 223 and this is the 253 or the cocoa brown. I'm working on the left side of the beach and I'm just adding more gray. And this is 570.9 phthalo blue that I'm adding to this side. Just using the sanded edge and using light, even strokes. There's the gray again, blue-gray, just making it really even. And I want everything to be parallel. So I'm being very careful about that. I believe there is some 522.8 turquoise blue in there as well. Now I've got something there I don't want, so I'm trying to rub it out with my finger. Here I'm using my 211 white, and I'm using it flat on the bottom edge to make parallel strokes. And I've switched to my 100.5 white to make wider strokes, working all the way down to the horse's hoof and just underneath it, and blending that with my hand, which is one of the beautiful things about velour, that you can do that. I'm using the 570.9 phthalo blue in between the horse's legs. I'm being very careful. Adding some more color now with our 205.3 lemon yellow. So I'm adding some green streaks into the water for color variation. You can see how easily we add these colors, and it gives the illusion of being at the beach. So we don't want it super detailed because we want the horse to be the focus, but we want our viewers to know we're at the beach. I'm putting in some white with my 211. And that's looking really good. I like the way that looks. I'm going to add some more white in between the tail, and then we can go back and add more black hairs to the tail when we get towards the finish. Now we're going to finish the bottom of the painting, the beach area. So I'm adding a coat of our light blue-gray 727.8 Rembrandt to the bottom. And I'm going to add some brighter blue with a 508.8 Prussian blue, which is what I'm using now. So I'm adding that color. I'm always going parallel with the lines, and it helps to create the illusion of reflection on the beach, which is what we want. So I'm just kind of using streaks to do this with. Now over here on the left is actually the edge of a wave. So I'm making that a darker value by using that blue. And that's a wave that's getting ready to splash up onto the beach. So the base of the wave, we want to darken that. We're using the 229 burnt umber to do that. I'm very lightly doing that. So that pushes the wave back and makes it look like it's standing up, getting ready to crest over onto the beach. This is the 205.3 lemon yellow. Adding a little green to that wave, which mixes well with the blue. And over the green, I'm using 522.8 turquoise blue to further blend those colors together and add a little more accent. Here I'm using the Blue Haze 405 NuPastel, and I'm using it on the edge with little kind of circular motions to just kind of add some dark accents into that wave. That was a little much, so I'm going to blend that out. I'm using my kneaded eraser to take a little color off and put a little white over it to fix it. It's always good to know how to fix something. I don't get it right all the time, but knowing how to make it better is what's important too. And this is the 223 burnt umber, putting the dark in. I'm putting dark under the hoof. And in this reflection that's directly underneath the horse. And I'm using parallel streaks of color. And I'm using a circular motion with my 211 white to add more foam to the top of this little wave. Here I'm using the 100.5 Rembrandt white on the flat edge to lighten up the front area underneath the legs, working towards the front of my painting. This is going to be my beach area, and this is over the blue-gray that we put down before. I'm making a light, even application. Using the edge of my 211 NuPastel to make brighter areas of white. We need to add some reflections. So I'm using the 253 Cocoa Brown to reflect the horse. Actually, this brown is to reflect the horse as a shadow down into the beach. Because the beach is wet, we want to make it an indistinct shadow. So that's what I'm doing with the 253 Cocoa Brown, to create the illusion of a shadow on the beach. I'm adding more white with the 100.5 Rembrandt white to the left side of my painting. I've decided to add a little more blue haze to punch up this area's color a little bit. I like the way that looks. Now we're going to add a little foam with a piece of drywall screen and the 100.5 Rembrandt. And as I scrape over the screen, it puts very small pastel particles, which will look like foam, add the effect of that, over the painting. This is kind of cool. Now, I like the way that looks. In order to get it to stay on the painting and not fall off, we're going to lay a piece of paper or glassine over top of it and gently press it into the background. I just gently pat it with my hands to make sure that the pastel stays in place. Here I'm using the Create-A-Color black stick, or you could use your 6B charcoal or your NuPastel to add some final hairs to the mane and to the tail. I hope you've enjoyed this project. Join me for other projects in the future, and you can see more of my work at kwit.com.